Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in life when silence says more than words ever could. A moment when walking away without noise, without drama, without the need to be heard, becomes the loudest declaration of strength you'll ever make. We've been taught that power looks like fighting, explaining, proving, but real strength, it lives in the quiet decision to no longer shrink yourself for someone who never chose to understand you. This isn't about bitterness, it's about dignity. It's about the moment you choose peace over performance and realize you never needed the last word to reclaim your power. There's something quietly powerful about knowing your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. For too long, many people have treated consistency, loyalty, and emotional availability as things to be expected from others rather than honored. They assume your kindness will always be there, your patience will stretch infinitely, your love will wait until they're ready to value it. But the truth is, when presence becomes routine in someone else's mind, it starts to lose meaning in their eyes. When someone doesn't have to work to keep you, doesn't have to show up, listen, respect, or invest in you, your presence shifts from something cherished to something assumed. And the moment that happens, the dynamic begins to erode. You might not notice it immediately. It starts slowly. They respond a little later than they used to. They forget the small things that matter to you. They start showing up half-present, distracted, inconsistent, distant, and instead of questioning them, you begin to question yourself. You wonder if you're asking for too much. You rationalize their behavior. You start doing more, giving more, hoping that if you just love a little harder, they'll finally meet you where you are. But they don't. Because why would they? If someone believes they can keep you by doing the bare minimum, they won't suddenly start doing the maximum. If they know you'll forgive every broken promise, reply to every lazy text, tolerate every passive absence, they have no incentive to grow, no reason to shift, no urgency to value. What once required intention now becomes a pattern of neglect, and your role turns from partner to emotional placeholder. Presence should never be assumed. It should be earned through effort, intention, and mutual respect. It's not about playing games or withholding affection. It's about upholding standards. Your energy is not a vending machine that dispenses comfort and support on command. It is not something that someone can keep collecting without making deposits of care, communication, and clarity. When your presence becomes expected, your absence becomes the only thing that gets noticed. That's why walking away, even temporarily, can shake someone more than all the conversations in the world, because people often only hear silence when it's deafening. They feel loss when they no longer have access to the version of you who always showed up regardless of how they treated you. This doesn't mean you stop being kind. It doesn't mean you shut down emotionally or build walls that no one can cross. It simply means you stop giving endlessly to people who don't recognize the value of what you give. You start observing effort, not just words. You let people earn space in your life with the same intentionality you bring to theirs. And when they don't, you don't beg. You step back. Sometimes the greatest wake-up call isn't what you say, it's what you stop giving, the consistency you withdraw, the access you no longer offer, the support you reserve for someone who sees it for what it is, rare, steady, and deeply valuable. In a healthy dynamic, presence is mutual. You don't have to chase, you don't have to over-explain, you don't have to exhaust yourself trying to remind someone that you matter. You feel it in how they show up, not just in the big moments, but in the daily, ordinary ways they choose to meet you halfway. You were not made to be someone's convenience. You were made to be someone's conscious choice, someone's priority. And if they treat you like a background option instead of a front-row commitment, they don't deserve the view your presence offers. Because showing up consistently isn't something you owe anyone. It's something they earn through how they value you when you do. When you stop offering your presence unconditionally, you create space for people to either rise to the standard or exit your life, and both are forms of peace. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to demand attention. All you have to do is quietly remind yourself you are not here to convince anyone of your worth. Your presence is a privilege. It always has been. You just forgot that for a while. There's a difference between love and labor. One should feel alive in your spirit. The other begins to drain you slowly, quietly, until your reflection starts to feel unfamiliar. What begins as care, intention, and heart can turn into emotional fatigue when it's not met with reciprocity. Love, at its healthiest, flows both ways. It's not about perfect balance every single day, but about mutual recognition. Two people showing up for each other, even in imperfect ways. But when you're the only one showing up, when your texts go unanswered, your feelings go unnoticed, your efforts go underappreciated, something starts to shift inside you. You begin to feel hollow, not because you're weak, but because you're pouring from a place that's no longer full. You're showing up again and again, offering your time, your attention, your emotional availability, but nothing is coming back. Maybe they give you crumbs, just enough to keep you hopeful. A late reply here, a small gesture there, enough to stop you from leaving, but never enough to make you feel chosen. You stay, convincing yourself it's love. You say this, satsang. Things like, they're just going through something, or they love me, they just don't know how to show it. And those thoughts might even be true, but they don't change the reality of how unseen you feel. You start changing your tone so they won't get defensive. You water yourself down so you don't seem too emotional. You become more patient, more flexible, more tolerant. Not because they asked you to, but because you think maybe, just maybe, if you can be just a little easier to love, they'll start loving you the way you hope they can, but they don't. And the more you adapt, the more distant they become, because the less you require from them, the less they give. The less you speak up, the more invisible you feel. What once was an act of love becomes a quiet betrayal of yourself. When you constantly invest in someone who does not reciprocate, not emotionally, not mentally, not even practically, you teach your nervous system that love means exhaustion, that connection means overextension, that care requires sacrifice. And that's when something dangerous happens. You start thinking, this is normal. You start calling it loyalty when really, it's fear. Fear of letting go, fear of being alone, fear that if this doesn't work, maybe nothing will. And so you stay, not because it's right, but because it's familiar. But no matter how deeply you care, a connection built on one-sided effort cannot sustain itself. And you know this. Your body knows this. It tells you in the fatigue you carry, in the anxiety that creeps in after a good moment, wondering when it will end, in the sadness you can't quite name because nothing dramatic happened, just a slow erosion of everything you once gave freely. You've become the emotional provider, the planner, the forgiver, the fixer, but who's holding space for you? This isn't about needing grand gestures or perfection. It's about needing to feel seen, to feel that when you reach out, someone reaches back, that when you speak, someone listens, that when you love, someone meets you with the intention to hold it, not just accept it passively. When your energy is constantly being poured into a one-sided dynamic, it becomes self-betrayal, because at some point, you know better. You know how little you're receiving compared to what you're giving. You know how tired you are. You know you're trying to build a connection on your own, and that isn't what real partnership looks like. But sometimes knowing better isn't enough, because letting go feels like failure, when really, staying is what slowly erases you. You want them to wake up, to realize, to change. But people don't transform because you gave more. They transform because they choose to. And if someone hasn't chosen to match your energy by now, it's not your responsibility to keep lighting the fire for both of you. There is nothing noble about abandoning yourself for someone who is comfortable watching you do all the work. The moment you recognize that, something powerful begins. You stop asking for more and start giving yourself the energy you were so willing to give away. There is a part of you that wants to scream, to let it all out, to pour every ounce of pain and frustration into one final monologue that will finally make them understand. You want them to hear what you've been carrying, to feel the weight of every silent night, every unanswered message, every effort that went unnoticed. You want them to get it. How hard you tried, how much you tolerated, how many times you swallowed your pride just to keep the peace. And part of you believes that maybe if you say it loud enough, clear enough, raw enough, they'll wake up. They'll finally see what they were blind to when they start. Elle had you. But strength doesn't always look like that. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all. No final explosion, no dramatic exit, no last-minute breakdown. Just a quiet shift, the kind of silence that doesn't beg to be understood, but instead demands to be respected. The kind that says, I'm not angry, I'm done. Loud reactions feel satisfying in the moment. They feel like control, like justice, but they often leave you empty afterward, realizing that no volume of expression could create clarity for someone who was never really listening. You could pour your entire heart out, and they'd still only hear what they want to hear. You could cry, shout, accuse, explain, and they'd still spin the story in their favor. And after the noise settles, all that's left is the same unresolved emptiness, just dressed up in drama. But when you walk away without the performance, something shifts, not just for them, but for you. You reclaim your energy. You stop handing over your power in the form of emotional outbursts. You stop hoping that your pain will finally earn you their attention, because deep down, you start to realize that attention won through crisis isn't connection, it's reaction, and reaction isn't love, it's just noise. Quiet exits aren't cold, they're sacred. They come from a place of deep clarity, not spite, a knowing that no explanation will ever change what they chose not to value, a truth that repeating yourself one more time won't bring peace. It will just reopen wounds that deserve to be left alone.